everybody, welcome back to the Deconversionists with your hosts, Alan Bondar and Elliot Christopherson. It's great to be with you guys today. I just came back from delivering my route in the freaking cold weather. I don't know how cold it is. I didn't even check, but it was so cold and my fingers were frozen the whole time. And it's really hard to deal with mail and scanners when your hands are frozen. Yeah, it sucks. And then, of course, I have one of those old metal trucks, you know, the tin cans, and they blow out heat like this. It's like, it's about the extent of the heat, you guys. It's this little blow, and the vent that, like, the hoses are never even attached to the vents anymore in these trucks because it's so old. So they're just like dangling. So you're like trying to band them up where you need them. Anyway, it was terrible today.
Hey, are you going to get one of those new mail trucks they just rolled out?
Well, I had one. Oh, you mean the big duck-looking ones?
Yeah, the weird-looking ones.
Okay, no, probably not. So here's what so I had a Metris, the van-looking ones. And then I got rear-ended by a big box truck while I was sitting in a mailbox, and they totally, and they're not making those anymore because they're just a bad design. They're just horrible vehicles. So they're phasing them out. So nobody's getting new ones of those. So they downgraded me to the LLV, the long life. It's called a long life vehicle. That's what these old tin cans are because they last forever. Like they just won't die. I mean, they're great vehicles. They're good for delivery. They're good setup. Everything's like great about them. It would have been nice if they just took the same exact model, but just fucking upgraded it with some heat and air, you know, like it wasn't that complicated, but they decided to try to make all kinds of new models and designs and whatever. Anyway.
Yeah.
So here we are. But my understanding about the new one with where it's really tall and thin and whatever, it's like, I understand those are only made for city carriers.
Oh, okay.
I don't know that for sure, but that's what I've read. And, you know, right now you just kind of hear.
Well, you'll have to take your old one to the city and like swap it with somebody without them knowing.
Right. They'll never notice ever.
Right. Definitely not. Do what you got to do, man. Hey, remind me, I've got to send you a video from the 90s on YouTube. It's a news report about mail carriers and drinking on the job. It's the most hilarious thing I've ever seen.
Okay.
It was the Wild West back then.
That sounds good. Dude, send it to me. I want to check it out. And I was going to say, hey, remind me after the show to do what I'm about to do, but I'm just going to do it now, so I don't have to ask you to remind me. This Sunday at 2 p.m., we are having a special guest on. It is Tiziana Severse. She has her own podcast called Notes from the Other Side. And she is a Christian. She walks in the same vein as Josh Patterson that we had on a couple weeks ago. They both are process theologians, and so they have very similar views. So this time we're not going to press her on the same type of thing we did with Josh. The goal isn't to try to help her realize why Christianity is a farce or whatever. This time we're actually bringing her on to talk about something that we're uniting on, that we agree on, and that is the problems of Christian nationalism.
Right.
He also can't stand it, and I believe Josh doesn't like it either, if I'm not mistaken. But I don't want to speak for him. But I will speak.
I have no doubt.
Well,
I think we can confidently say that.
I'm pretty sure, yeah. But definitely Tiziana. So she's going to come on this Sunday, and we're just going to have a great conversation. From a Christian's perspective, she's going to share the issues she has with Christian nationalism, and I'm excited about that because I think it's good, and because whether or not you're a Christian, I think it goes to show that this is a problem. And there's no reason that it should be a part of our government system. So
that's good. That's good because today's topic is definitely gonna set the groundwork for what we do on Sunday.
Good. So in introducing the topic, I'm just going to throw out a thought that I had today, and then if it ties in, great. Then you can merge us and bring your thoughts in. Or if not, then you just be like, that doesn't tie in at all, and we'll
Sounds
just
go
good. But I had an interesting thought today. And it was something along the lines of why is it that it is so hard to persuade Christians or people of faith in general that there's no God, that it's just something they're believing that has no evidence, no proof, whatever. And I think it was almost like this epiphany. If you believe in the supernatural, obviously, we believe you're brainwashed into that to begin with, but it doesn't matter. The point is, if you believe in the supernatural, there is no limits to what you'll believe about it because the supernatural can do anything. There's nothing it can't do. as long as, and nothing's impossible in your mind, as long as you believe the God you believe in says so. And that happens through various means, either in the book that's written and how you interpret it, or your pastor, or whatever. But you believe your God believes, or your God says this thing happens. So, like anything that seems impossible just becomes a miracle, and it's just
Right.
very hands up, abracadabra. It just doesn't matter, and it's magic, right? Everything it's just like magic, but they don't call it magic because it's definitely serious. It's not. It's magic is. That's not real. Magic's ridiculous. That's just things people trick you in it. But God, He can do anything. He does miracles. And if you believe this is possible, if you believe in the supernatural, it's like no matter how ridiculous we paint the picture, like we did last week, no matter how absurd the beliefs are, no matter how absurd something is that you think is true, it just doesn't matter because it's part of the supernatural. And it's not testable to begin with. You can't verify it at all anyhow. So you literally can just believe anything and it goes. And as long as that's the case, all the reason in the world, all the logic in the world will never be able to persuade you that your ludicrous thought of what is just magic out here or miracles doesn't happen. You can't be persuaded of that because there's no logic to begin with as to why you believe the supernatural exists. So that was just kind of like a really interesting moment for me because I was like, yeah, there's just no logicizing somebody out of it. That's just not the way it works. Now, I've heard people say, yeah, well, I got into it through reason and logic. Okay, sure, you think that, but that's just not the case because there is no reason or logic for the supernatural. But you think there is because, again, nothing is impossible with God. It's just you can just believe anything. So you think it's reasonable. You think it's logical because it's God, and everything we have in this world that's reasonable or logical is God, right? It comes from God. God's the logic behind everything. So, like, even the things we can verify through evidence, that comes from God anyway. So, sure, of course, we'll believe that because it's logical. It comes from God. But things you can't prove, also from God. So we believe that too. Anyway, do you want to share your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely, I do because I have a lot of thoughts on this. So this makes perfect sense. So even though I'm an atheist, I don't particularly enjoy talking about the arguments for or against the existence of God. I'm an ex-Christian probably first because I became an ex-Christian before I became an atheist. So I like to talk about the arguments and the evidence for and against the Christian faith itself. But what I see in the culture as a whole, the Christian culture, and especially apologetics, is this kind of avoidance of talking about why Christianity specifically is true, and they concentrate more on the arguments for the existence of God. Because if they can convince somebody that there is a God, then suddenly their entire religion becomes much more plausible. Because if you come to believe that you are living in the Matrix, then anything is possible whatsoever. So nothing's going to shock you that you see. There's no miracles or bendings of the laws of physics that you're going to think are not plausible because you have already been convinced that you're living inside of a realm where that is normal and even expected. So we see people arguing for a God before we see them arguing for Christianity, and if they can make one possible, then everything else just follows naturally from that. Now in my my worldview, you have to then, once you demonstrate there's a God, you then have to prove every single aspect of Christianity, because just because a God exists and miracles are possible does not mean that these miracles happened and that this particular religion is true. So I often run into Christians that don't want to talk about the evidence from the Bible. They just want to talk about these complicated philosophical arguments for the existence of God, and I find them really frustrating because there's a quote, I forget who said it. I always forget who says these quotes, so I got to paraphrase them all the time. Unless you write them down and keep them on hand all the time. But it goes like this: a little bit of philosophy leads you away from God, but a lot of philosophy brings you back. you can, and that's kind of why I don't really have a huge appreciation for getting deep into philosophy, because you can literally use philosophy to prove anything if you try hard enough. It's like building this massive complex, like, or a house of cards or whatever. You can prove anything. Like if you stretch it hard enough, or if you introduce more concepts, like it gets so messy so fast that these are the tricks essentially of the mind that humans use to prove anything they want to prove. So they have obviously they have a bias towards a God existing, because I think that comes natural for some reason. Probably the culture that we grew up in, like the vast majority of the population believes in some kind of a God. So it's very easy for them to be tricked or convinced by some complicated philosophical argument, and then they don't have to do any, in just the way it goes, they don't have to do any work then to get to Christianity. They're like, well, God exists, miracles are true, like, and all this just makes sense. So yeah, it makes sense to me that what you're saying, 100%.
So even when I was a Christian, especially the latter years, when I was a full preterist, I believed that miracles, prophecy, things of that sort, all ceased in 70 AD. They were done away with because they were not necessary anymore. Because the purpose of all of them were to point to the realities, spiritual realities that we supposedly live in the new covenant. So the interesting thing is that even as a Christian in those years, you couldn't have convinced me that a miracle took place. I was one of those that even refused to call childbirth a miracle. I know people would say, "Oh, it's a miracle." No, it's not. That's not a miracle. Even that's just a natural way that God designed the universe to work.
Everything reproduces.
Right. So I wouldn't have called that a miracle even then. So I know people will say something's a miracle, and sometimes they mean it just poetically, and this happened. Oh, it's a miracle. I'm all right with using it poetically like that, but in the literal sense of the word, you wouldn't have been able to convince me that a miracle took place here in the new covenant, because I believe they were ceased. Or prophecy, right, or anything. So because I believed in the supernatural, and also knew that nobody was going to be able to demonstrate to me that a miracle was taking place, it's just not going to happen. I just knew that. But the reason I knew that is because I was influenced by the Bible, and I believed 100% that they ceased. And so there's no way in hell you're going to be able to produce a miracle, because the Bible says they're done. And so everything was influenced by that. But that didn't stop me from believing they happened at one point in time. And I never had to see one. I never had to experience one. I just had to believe God said they were real. And I just believe they existed at one point in time for no good reason other than anything's possible, because God says it. If you believe the supernatural, it all happens.
Right.
So miracles, like I said, prophecy, these sorts of things they just don't happen in real life. And it's odd to me when I see or hear people that say to me, well, you just haven't experienced one, but they happen, or whatever. And I'm like, okay, well, first of all, theologically speaking, I just don't see how you can make a case for that. But I like experientially, I have a real struggle with that, because as I've said several times on this show, I get very frustrated with people who continuously tell me that the reason they know for sure God existed because he's appeared to them, or he gave them a miracle, or a demon, or they saw whatever, And I'm like, and yet you can't tell me how to experience that same thing.
Right.
So go ahead.
Well, I just want to add, if they're using personal experience to get to a God because they've experienced a miracle or they've experienced God, then, and that's their proof, and that's their number one proof, or the only proof that they give you, then it makes perfect sense that I can use the same process to determine that there is no God, because I have not experienced a miracle and I have not experienced God. So why is their proof acceptable, but mine isn't? Like, if that's how you get there and I haven't had that experience, then I'm perfectly justified in saying, well, then according to my personal experience, there is no God.
Right. No, and that's reasonable, but that's the whole problem is God is the reason behind your reason. So you're the one who's unreasonable now because we take it on faith because God said it. Because it's just, it's frustrating, man. Because you can't. And I guess that's why I've approached my book the way that I did, because I knew that if you're going to remove the brainwashing, it's not going to happen by making all the logical arguments and putting in their face and showing them how unreasonable it is, because that's not going to work. If by any chance I'm lucky enough to peel back the brainwashing through this process that I've written in my book, that's the only way to be successful. Because you have to be able to step outside of that matrix for a minute and say, why am I believing this? What's so great about this that I feel compelled to hold on to something that I'm just making up as I go along? Because everybody believes something different. Everybody, man, it's incredible. From the cessationists to the people who believe they raised the fucking dead today, man.
Well, it's what's interesting to me is you talk about being a full preterist who no longer believed in miracles and thought they had all been accomplished by 70 AD. So when I was a Christian, I was a Baptist, and I was not a cessationist. Well, I was a cessation. I was not a preterist. So I believed that all of the things in Revelation and a lot of the things that Jesus preached were still to come. But just like you, in the present, I didn't believe miracles happened. So it's funny, we both have carved out this exception for the modern era where miracles don't happen. It's very convenient to be living in a time when, they happened in the past and they'll happen in the future. But hey, today, when we actually use, evidence for things, today they don't happen. There's no way to observe one. It's like, wow, you could not have built a more convenient worldview to give yourself a special exception for never having to witness a miracle or never having to prove a miracle. Like, wow, God cut out this little era right here in the present when we have video cameras and other ways to test miracles. Oh, well, that's when they're not going to happen. Like, to me, it's obvious that we're just making excuses all day long, whether you're a full preterist, a partial preterist, or a dispensationalist, or a Baptist, or whatever you happen to be.
Right.
You've given yourself an out where, oh, well, those aren't happening today. Now, I know that doesn't apply to probably most Christians. A lot of them think miracles are still happening, but we can analyze those miracles and they all fall apart in some way because there's never actual proof for them. It's always based on a story or an account or a testimony.
Right.
And that's not good enough for me. There's a very large book. I haven't actually read it, but I've done everything but read it because I read parts of it. And I very quickly concluded this is not going to work as actual proof. And I believe a guy by the name of Craig Keener wrote a book on miracles where he decided to archive or, use a whole bunch of case studies, detail all the miracles of the modern era that he had investigated for himself as, proof of the supernatural. And, I read one of the stories he had and I realized very quickly, all of this is just based on stories and personal testimonies and accounts of people who had witnessed it or claims of the miracle. But none of these were actually testable. It all came down to, hey, I got a really good story here. I'm a credible source. I wouldn't lie, or these people wouldn't lie, or how could this be untrue if we all witnessed it? But for me, the reader, or me, the third party after the fact, it's always after the fact. Like, I can't verify any of that. Like, you could write thousands of pages of miracle accounts and they do absolutely nothing for me because they're past tense and there was no documentation except the people who witnessed them. Like, to me, it's worthless.
Yeah. Well, the problem, and as I've heard it from certain Christians, is that you have to believe in order to experience them, or you have to believe in order to trust that they're happening. Because the problem with us is we're just skeptical. You're just being ridiculous. You're not accepting things that are truly possible. You're just shutting them down. You atheists, all you do is say these things don't exist and I refuse to accept them. Right? That's the way they approach it. And that's not at all what we're actually saying. We're saying we would accept them if we actually had a reason to, but
what we don't accept are, if you're a Christian, you don't accept the miracle stories and the claims and the accounts and the testimonies from other religions, and you don't accept those same things from deep in history. So the first proper historian in the ancient world is Herodotus. Now, Herodotus wrote a lot about the ancient Greeks and I think the Persians as well. He lived back then, but he didn't witness a lot of the stuff. But he wrote an actual history book detailing all of these different events, and he very frequently added in all kinds of supernatural impacts and effects and happenings that how the gods intervened in a war or something ridiculous. And we use Herodotus in the modern era as an actual scholar and historian, but we reject, like all of modern scholarship just automatically rejects his miracle claims and his supernatural claims, because these are stories. Like we understand that today that this almost certainly didn't happen. But now, if that was like the Gospel of John, written not extremely long after Herodotus, well, then you get, a billion people or a couple billion people alive today that just accept it. But they don't accept Herodotus. They don't accept anything from any other religions. They don't accept the gurus in India that are performing miracles right now. Some are even on tape. They don't accept any of that. It's always, hey, it's the special pleading fallacy where,
right,
we always carve out a special exception for our beliefs.
Right. As I said earlier, it's got to be that it's you believe the God you believe in said it. Like you have to believe that the God that you believe in, like that's the only version that you'll accept. And that's why people who aren't Christians, but are from other religions, think that their religion is true. I mean, it's just, if your God said it, then it's true. And it's possible. But, if he says any other gods don't exist, and that's not possible. But, funny thing, again, this is stretching into the vast variety of Christianity is, as a preterist, I started to, so first, there's so many thoughts running through my head. So you were talking about, in our time where, we're using reason and logic, and just this time, all of a sudden, these things aren't happening. And again, it's because we're suppressing God's power right now by just using human reason. And that's the problem with us, is we're just choosing to let God do his thing, as if we have power over God or something. But that's, that's what's happening. And I, even as a Christian, again, as a preterist, I came to conclude that demons don't actually exist. Now, I know the term is used in the Bible, but I think the Christadelphians got that interpretation right. I was able to find truths in all different people groups and religions, because everybody has a smidgen of truth in this life. And they seem to nail it, because everywhere in the Bible that talked about demons, it seemed to be talking about sicknesses and illnesses. It's why in the north, the demons were highly prevalent, but in the south, they didn't exist in Jerusalem, because that's where God's presence was. So the sicknesses and the illnesses weren't happening, but they were where Jesus had to go and start healing people.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a really fascinating study. So I was like, damn, that made so much sense to me. And I was like, settled. So I stopped believing in demons. And it's interesting that I've personally never met a person who doesn't believe in demons that has experienced a demon or a demon possession.
Wow.
But people who do believe in them do experience them. So, my thing is like, okay, if you don't want to stop believing in God or angels or whatever, because you still holding on to that, do a test. Stop believing in demons, and you'll quickly find out they don't exist. It's just the craziest thing how they leave you alone if you stop believing in them. And you would think the opposite would be true, that you'd be more susceptible to a possession if you stop believing in it, because then your guard is down. But instead, they just leave you alone.
Yeah.
They don't bug you anymore. And I'm like, I tell Christians who are like struggling to why their demons exist. I was like, hey, look, if you just stop believing in them, you don't have to worry about them anymore. There's nothing to be afraid of, man. They go away.
It's funny how the proof never happens to the skeptic. Now, I know a lot of people would say, well, I used to be a skeptic and I saw something. Okay, fine. Yeah, everybody's got a story, but like it's never happened to me. And you know what? I think something we need to clarify for the audience here is that we're not unwilling to witness a miracle. Like, just because I'm a skeptic and I don't believe somebody else's story does not mean I'm not open to seeing it for myself. Look, I don't believe in Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, alien abductions. cryptozoology. There's a lot of conspiracy theories I don't believe in, but there's a lot of claims out there of things that exist in the real world, whether it's miracles done by God or healings, whatever. But I am completely open to witnessing or observing any of those things myself. You know, if I was up in the Pacific Northwest and I ran smack into Bigfoot, there's not a whole lot that I can do to rationalize that in some skeptical way and disbelieve it. I absolutely, if I came face to face with him, I absolutely would then accept that, hey, this thing is actually real. You know, why should I be specifically excluded from having these experiences just because I'm a skeptic?
Right.
Like,
No,
I would like to see something like this, but my whole life I've never seen anything supernatural whatsoever.
dude.
Now you could say, well, you're being an arrogant skeptic who just rejects everything unless it just appears to you specifically. Like, who do you think you are that you need proof? But why not? Why not? I mean, so many other people have these stories. Why am I being arrogant when I say, well, I'd like to see for myself too?
Yeah. No, I agree totally. So I think in January, one of the things that I'm tossing around, and I got to work out the logistics and the details, because I'm going to put out a challenge on the Unraveler show at least. And I don't know, maybe you'll want to do this with me, but so we can even figure that out. But for me anyway, I'm running out a challenge that I'm willing to do anything that within reason that would have given me the opportunity to experience the supernatural. Where you come on and you tell me what to do. Like, it might be a nature hike at 10 p.m. at some haunted place or whatever, and you have to do it at a certain time. Okay, I'll go, I'll do the experience, I'll bring my video camera, I'll record the whole thing and see if I have the experience, see if I get to see what you say I'm going to.
Well, you don't even have to bring your video camera, because I know some people will say, well, if you're bringing proof to something like that, it's not going to appear to you. Like, fine, I don't have to record it. I just want to see it.
And if they say that, then I'll do it without the video camera. So, I mean, I'll allow stipulations like that. I'm not going to do something stupid like, jump off the Empire State Building. I'm not going to do something like that. I'm also not going to read my Bible for 5 years until God proves himself to me. It's going to have to be something realistic. I need an experience that's going to let me know the supernatural exists. And I'm willing to do it. Just about anything. I'll fly somewhere, because if it does exist, it's worth the money. It's worth the time, because I want to freaking know if this shit exists. But don't just tell me it does.
And one qualifier I think we got to put on a challenge like that is, if you're asking something extreme that's going to alter our states of consciousness, that's not something that we should engage in. Because I saw one guy online claim that for a certainty you will meet God if you go out into the wilderness like Jesus did and you fast for 40 days.
Yeah. No.
Okay, well, if you don't eat for 40 days, you're out in the wilderness, you're going to start having hallucinations. Like, weird stuff's going to happen to you. You can alter your brain chemistry to the point where you're seeing things that aren't there. Okay, That's not the supernatural. That's you causing some physiological reaction. If
I have to suffer in order to experience God, if that's the only way to do it, then you can have it, because that's just pure stupidity.
Yeah, and we're not taking psychedelic drugs that's going to force an experience.
Yeah, I'm not going to jail for it.
Right.
But like, it's something within reason. That's why I said I have to flesh out the details, because it has to be something within reason, but something acceptable to the world that says, hey, Alan actually tried it. Because like, there's a lot of stupid things out there that people, bury yourself 6 feet under for 5 days. Yeah, okay. I mean, I'm not going to do stuff like that.
It has to be done with a sober mind.
Yeah, it has to be something realistic where God would actually show himself to me. Or it doesn't have to be God. He can send Michael the Archangel. I don't freaking care. Like, give me something that is actual, that I can tangibly know this God is.
And you can't include dreams and nighttime visions either, because that's something that happens naturally anyway.
Right.
Just if God comes to me in a dream, there's absolutely no way that I can differentiate between an actual God appearing to me in a dream and me just dreaming about meeting a God.
Right. And so the problem arises already, because it's the problem is, like, even if I'm out in this 9 and 10 o'clock place and I'm supposed to experience demons or whatever that I'm supposed to experience, and I go out there and something happens, something weird, my first inclination is to start with something, a naturalistic scientific explanation, because that's just a more logical approach to life. Oh, something weird happened. Let's see if this is explainable. My first leap is not to say supernatural. Like, that's just not the way anybody should be. Your first leap should not be something extravagant, ridiculous, and out of the normal. Like, that's just absurd to jump like that.
Right.
So you start with the normal means, and if nothing can explain it, then you might open up the possibility that there could be other explanations. But the problem is, even opening that possibility, now you have to have some way to test these other explanations to see if they're even
Well,
viable.
see, I don't even want to set up some kind of way to scientifically test it. I just want something to happen that I will recognize as from a God. So, for example, and I would really like a Christian to explain to me this theology. I'm sure they'll have a myriad of excuses, but look, God walked with Adam in the Garden of Eden. God came down and appeared to Moses, or appeared to Abraham. He sent his angel to stop Abraham from sacrificing his son. God appeared to the children of Israel, the entire nation. He appeared to them in a pillar of fire and a pillar of cloud during the day. Everywhere throughout the Bible, all the way up into the New Testament, like Jesus himself comes, he proves it to the apostles that he's real and he's actually the Son of God, raises from the dead. We've got Paul, even after that, having a Damascus Road experience. Like, it's pretty routine for God to show himself to somebody. Now, you can say, well, back then God was operating with people in a different way, and today we have to use faith. Fine. That falls apart, though, when we go back to the Old Testament. I think it's in Hebrews, where it says, Abraham believed God, and his faith was counted to him as righteousness. Okay, so faith is something that they were having all the way through the Old Testament. At the same time, these miracles and these appearances of God were happening. So faith is a constant. It's not something that all of a sudden now we have to have faith. Like, tell me why God has stopped appearing to people in the modern era. Why is the modern era special where this doesn't happen? And why can't it happen to me specifically?
So
am I not worthy of it?
My answer to you as a Christian would have been, because Hebrews says he has spoken to us finally in these last days, and those last days would have been the first century, and his son, Jesus Christ. So once Jesus came, the idea was the whole canon of Scripture was completed, and now we just have the Word of God right there in our hands at any given time.
Yeah,
whereas
the Word.
Up until then, they had only pieces and parts, and it was you only saw.
Right. So today we get the worst possible evidence imaginable, which is a written account in a book.
Exactly.
At the time when we have the most ability to test and observe these things.
Right. So, but that's
So God's hiding on purpose today.
Elliot, that's the point I was making at the very beginning of the show. Is it's a miracle. God gave us a book.
Real miracle.
I gave us a book, and we have.
Hey, Ellen, you gave us a book.
I did. I gave you a book, and in the book, I actually say that it's from God or something like that. I can't remember where I did it, but I did.
If Ellen's book isn't proof, then neither is the Bible. Like, why is a book proof of anything?
Right, but it's a miracle.
The book is the claim. It's not the evidence. You need evidence for the claim.
So here we are, and yeah, obviously we're in jest and a little mocking, because we've been there, and now we're on this side, and we're like, this is just nothing adds up, nothing makes sense in this whole world. But you're just so inundated, you're in the matrix, you're so stuck in it that everything makes sense to you, as absurd as it may be. You just accept anything as long as it aligns with your interpretation of the Bible. And then that changes also from year to year. So I mean, whatever you believe at any given time, as long as it lines up, anything within that interpretation is possible.
And also, it would be helpful if Christians could, when they answer these questions for us, which they won't, but if they did, could they also tell us like which specific denomination has the correct theology, so that I can bring that my skepticism in line with the one true religion?
Right.
Like, which one is it? Which one should I be listening to? Which specific doctrine or church should I be arguing with?
Yep. So we are willing and open. And I was 42 years. How long were you a Christian?
Up to age 35.
Age 35. So very close. So, Ellie and I believed, we followed God, and you as a Christian probably have your interpretation and someone else is there, and everybody has their own reasons as to why Ellie and I are no longer Christians. And fine, some people believe I'm going to eventually come back because once saved, always saved. Some believe I fell away, and some believe I was never saved to begin with. Okay. I have no idea. I don't know what Elliott's are either. You may have, 5 other things I hadn't even thought of. But at the end of the day, we want to know, like, I genuinely, if this God exists, why on earth did he do this to me? Did he do this to Elliott? Why? What?
Yeah.
What
well,
reason?
There's always an excuse, and it's always an excuse that's like a canned response where they just pop the can open and throw it at you. So I was discussing this online this last week, and so the guy I was talking to, he immediately pulled out this bullshit about, well, you're obviously just a teenager who got mad at his parents and is now doing this edgelord atheist phase online. I'm like, no, you're completely wrong. I'm 35 years old, and I was a fundamentalist Baptist my entire life. And his next comment was, oh, well, obviously then you had a bad experience in the church and now you're mad at God. And like they have this stuff like already prepackaged, these assumptions. Like, you were completely wrong with your first assumption, and you're completely wrong with your second. You just move on to the next one. Like, if I tell you, well, this is what you get for assuming about a stranger online, like, you're wrong. Like, oh, well, then this is the case. Then this is the case. There's always this matrix, this flow chart of bullshit excuses instead of actually listening to what you're saying.
And again, it's because anything goes and any explanation works as long as this person is shown that there's some supernatural reason why blah blah blah, or you avoided the supernatural and went to the natural. You went backwards. You went to the sinful life. Whatever it is, you were in the wrong denomination. You were a natural man. So
yeah, I call them lawyers for God. Every Christian is a lawyer for God. Every apologist is.
And they have
God,
to, because
it's the defense attorney with a guilty client. It's the defense of the guilty. So it's like we'll just keep making up, throwing stuff at the wall. We have to find a way to reconcile this because we know you're wrong. You're obviously wrong. We haven't even gotten to the details, but you're wrong. So we have to
Right. No, absolutely. Whereas in reality, the world we try to live in, when something is pointed out that our thinking is off, and it can be demonstrated, we say, all right, I need to rethink that. We don't just try to come up with excuses. Like, I don't need to come up with excuses and make shit up as to why my logic was off on, I don't know, or why my math was wrong, for example. The other day, yesterday, I suck at math, right? So we normally get 2 10-piece nuggets, and my stepdaughter just wanted 6 this time. And I was going on the app to order, and I realized, oh, wait a second, 20 nuggets is cheaper than even buying 110 and 1.6 separately. So I was like, I'm just going to buy 20. So we bought 20, and they came. I said, hey, you guys, take what you want. You can even have extra, whatever. I'm just going to take 2. And then I was like, and she's like, well, I'm going to take 6. And I'm like, well, that leaves, I think I said 14 for Bear or something. I don't know. My math was way off. And she's like, no, it only leaves 12. I was like, oh, I didn't need to argue with her. I wasn't, we literally could sit down and we could do the math, and we could say, hey, one of us is right and one of us is wrong, because we can't both be right. And so we just settled on logic and reason, and we said, hey, look, we used our fingers and everything worked out. And everybody walked away knowing what the real answer was. I didn't get to just say to her, oh, well, that's because you don't believe that God can do miracles and make 2 fish feed 5,000 people. So these nuggets most definitely could feed Bear 5 times over because you don't believe in them. You know what I mean? Like, you don't do.
Well, no, Ellen, you're supposed to. That's when you bring in complicated philosophical arguments about how the nuggets can be, many different. Well, you cut them in half, or it's ridiculous. It wears me out.
It is. So
because I want to have an actual conversation with people who have an open mind, who can admit sometimes that they're wrong. And what's frustrated me the most is I've been out of Christianity for 7 years now, and I've had countless conversations with Christians, both in person, online, over Zoom like this, and I've never once seen even a flicker of progress where they think, "Huh, you know what you said, that's interesting. Like, maybe there's something about this particular thing that I am ignorant of, and I'm going to go and look into this later." That's never happened. It's always been an automatic defense mechanism to fight me immediately.
yes, and there it is. That brings us full circle. That's what I was trying to communicate at the beginning. When your system is based on something like the supernatural, and there is no method by which you can determine whether something is absolute or not absolute in your system, and you can know what truth is without question, because obviously you can't, because there's so many denominations, and every Christian will say, well, I can know absolute truth. No, you clearly can't, because none of you can freaking agree, because there's no system, there's no litmus by which to determine who's right. Like you can with the fucking nuggets. Like, I can't do that with your system. So
right.
With the supernatural, it's wake up, people, and realize that you're using a system by which you literally make up whatever you want anytime you want, and it goes. It doesn't have to be sensical. It doesn't have to be reasonable. It doesn't have to be logical. You think it is, because in your mind, anything you say in the system goes, and therefore it must be reasonable and logical because it comes from God. But you're just making it up just as much as the person that's sitting across from you in the church down the street, in the Presbyterian church, in the Baptist church, in the Pentecostal. Everybody's got their own beliefs, because there's no litmus. There's no way to test these things to know what's real. You just make it up.
The human mind is really, really good at filling in the gaps when you don't have sufficient information. And I've got a chapter in my own book about miracles and like the problems with miracles. And a few of the things are like, maybe you didn't have 100% of the information available. Maybe you viewed this thing from your limited perspective. Maybe you added information later. Maybe your mind adapted to it. Maybe there's so many things that can go wrong. And I'll go back to that, like I mentioned Bigfoot before, and hiking in the Pacific Northwest and running face to face with Bigfoot. If you actually read the stories of people that have had that happen to them, it's very seldom, maybe even never, when they actually run face to face into this animal. It's always some kind of situation where they saw something hiding behind a tree and it was too large to be a bear, or it ran weird through the woods, and no animal could do that, and it was definitely not a human. Like, their minds are filling in these gaps because they're primed, because of where they are and the stories they've heard. They're primed to see Bigfoot, but they didn't actually see Bigfoot. They saw something and they interpreted it as that because they couldn't think of another explanation. It was so unnatural from their first person perspective or their angle that it just had to be this thing. Like, yeah, it's your brain is filling in information. It's something that it does. And if you don't study human psychology and understand how your own brain works, it's going to trick you. It's going to get you, and you're going to just not even second guess your own feelings. You're going to go with it, and then you're going to double down on that, and that's going to be your truth. And nobody's going to be able to talk you out of that, because you don't understand how your own brain works.
Yep, all very good. And before lest we get the comments, because I see them already coming. Oh, well, you atheists do the same thing. You people who believe in science, you do the same thing. You and your evolution and your.
If I did the same thing, I'd still be a Christian.
your abiogenesis, you believe that everything came from nothing. You believe this stuff too. You fill in gaps. Look, you're so off on that. It's just mind blowing how Christians just assume things without ever actually taking the time to understand a position other than theirs. No scientist that I know of in the face of history that I'm aware of says that we know with 100% certainty of anything. We say we have this with maximal certainty. We think this is probably the case based on the evidence that we have, but we are willing to change our mind at the drop of a hat when something else presents itself that makes more sense or contradicts this.
That's the purpose. That's the purpose of science is to isolate those biases and those variables and remove them from the equation so that you aren't filling in the gaps.
Correct. Exactly. So that's majorly different than the theistic mindset that says, I know 100% with certainty that God exists, when you're only minimally certain. You don't even have anything to demonstrate this. You just make it up, and you're changing your mind on things about the supernatural all the time. And yet yesterday you were super certain about this because
I think we might have lost Ellen. I can see and hear myself, but he's frozen up, so I'm not sure what the viewers can see.
And
I think maybe our live stream has come to an end, so perhaps Ellen can edit this out. My apologies to anybody watching who can only hear me and not Ellen. So we're just going to wait. Anyway, folks, that'll do for this week.
Oh, hey, are we back?
Were you still recording me though the entire time?
I know. No, my internet looks like it crashed for a minute. I have no idea why, and we couldn't get a signal. So I don't know if anybody heard anything for like that segment. And we
I could see it. I could see and hear myself, but I wasn't sure if it was still going.
No, but fortunately, it did not kill the recording. So at least everything we did up to that point did record. So that's good news.
Okay. So might be a good place to stop if we froze up.
We're just going to stop. I don't know.
We got close to 30 minutes.
Right. I don't know. Yeah, right. I don't know what they heard from my last comments there anyway. It probably got cut off halfway through. So the cool thing is, if you're still watching, you get to fill in the rest of the story.
Yeah, you get to use that human flaw and just fill it all in.
Where I said after that. Oh, we're back for a second.
You're freezing up again? Okay. Yeah, we better cut our losses.
All right. I don't know if you're still there, but
you see me?
Yeah, we've tried to end the show 3 times now, and it just
okay.
So StreamYard is having issues. It wasn't my internet. StreamYard.
That's good.
So I'm going to end this while we can before it goes dead again. Everybody, thanks for watching. We appreciate it. Remember, we're here to unravel the con in your conversion. Have a great night, everybody.